Hello, I'm Michelle Morgan. I'm an author and playwright, and I'm in the beautiful Berkelow's Book Barn and Cafe in historic Berrima to talk about my two historical novels for young adults. Flying Through Clouds is my new novel, published last year, and it's about a teenage boy who dreams of becoming an aviator. It's also about the issues he faces growing up, which I think are relevant to teenagers today. Flying Through Clouds follows on from my first novel, Racing the Moon. Racing the Moon is about Joe's experiences at a Sydney boarding school from which he's expelled and then sent to a farm reform school on the south coast. Both novels share the same main character, a teenage boy called Joe Riley, and the settings are similar. They're both mostly set in Sydney during the 1930s. They also have several chapters set on the south coast of New South Wales, but Flying Through Clouds has a couple of other locations, including Canberra, northern New South Wales and southeastern Queensland. Both novels are a compelling mix of adventure, drama and humour, and they would appeal to teenagers and the young at heart. I spent months immersing myself in research to write these novels. I wanted to find out everything I possibly could about life in the 1930s. The houses people lived in, the food they ate, the clothing they wore, the transport that was used back then, how they communicated with each other, the types of jobs that people had, for those who did have jobs because it was the Depression. And I found that the 1930s are truly a fascinating period. Not only did we manage to build amazing infrastructure like the Sydney Harbour Bridge, which at the time was considered to be one of the wonders of the world, but we developed this amazing aviation industry. Pioneering aviators like Sir Charles Kingsford Smith, Nancy Bird and Bert Hinkler became famous throughout the world. Before I wrote a word of these novels, I had to do so much research. But the hardest research I had to do was to learn how to fly a gypsy moth plane, but without actually flying one. That was my challenge. I read every book I came across on gypsy moth planes. I watched technical videos over and over again. I needed to become familiar with the terminology and the steps involved. I also interviewed pilots, particularly those that had knowledge or experience flying vintage planes, and I was lucky enough to come across Prue Mason, a children's author and pilot with extensive experience flying vintage planes, and Prue was kind enough to edit the early versions of my 4 flying chapters. When you sit down to write a novel, one of the first things you have to do is to work out who is going to tell your story. I wrote Flying Through Clouds and Racing the Moon in the first person from Joe's point of view. And it's difficult to actually come up with the voice of a teenage boy growing up in Sydney in the 1930s. But I, did the research, I read books, I watched old videos, film clips, I interviewed significant males in my life, and I dug deep to find the rebellious teenager within, because Joe is a bit of a rebel. I'm very excited to be the winner of the 2017 Squibby Spark Award in the Older Readers category for Flying Through Clouds. Squibby is the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, and it's an international organisation. The Spark Award is awarded annually for excellence in children's books from around the world that are published independently. I would like to thank the Sydney Mechanics School of Arts and the Tom Keneally Centre for the opportunity to make this video and to talk about my 2 novels. If you'd like more information about me and my books, please go to my website. I hope you enjoy Flying Through Clouds and Racing the Moon.